Shout out to the gayest podcast out there with Ross and Calum, jiujitsuoracle.
How to win at CJI, what tactics, what strategy is best to employ to win a Quintet style event. I'm Ross, joined by Calum. We're going to give our thoughts on how we would play it if we were in charge of one of these 8 teams that are taking part in the CJI tournament. I have some thoughts on this based on going back and watching the B Team Bulls winning their Quintet event, and also our gym, SBG Aberdeen. We had a team a few years ago entered a tournament along these lines, and I think by the end of the tournament, the guys had worked out how to play it pretty well and came up with a winning strategy. So I'm using both of those situations to illuminate my thoughts and give some ideas. Anyway, Calum, first of all, you're in charge of the team. What would be like your general strategy as to like who you'd put out first and who you'd put out last? Because I think they're the things you've got most control over, particularly who you would put out first.
Yeah, so obviously it's different from the previous quintets because it seems like they're able to, say Nicky Rod beats Kynan, then Atos can select who they want to go out and face Nicky Rod next. So there's that whole element, yeah.
I was just going to say, yeah, previously in Quintet, you had to put your 5-man lineup in before the match, the order it's going to take part. On this one, we're going to have first guy out, and then after every match, winner stays on, draw, both guys eliminated. The coaches get a brief period of time to then select the athlete they want to go out for the next match. So there's a bit more scope for adjusting on the fly, etc., which is going to come into my strategy. But anyway, you've got your first guy that you're going to send out. What's like your archetype for like, yes, this is what I want to put out first?
It's difficult because I think you typically want to start strong, but at the same time, say you start strong and you put out like a Nicky Rod or a Kynan, and then, someone else puts out like a very defensively good 77 or 88, then that takes your guy out. That could potentially be like a bit demoralizing to your team. So it's difficult to say. I think most of the strategy will come into like who each team picks for each individual match if the other team gets a sub and that guy is still on and they know who they're going to be putting them out against. I think that's when most of the strategy is going to come in for this event. But yeah, I would say probably you'd want a relatively strong start with like a big guy that can take some people out. But at the same time, like I say, if you put out one of your best guys and he gets stalled out, that could be a bit of a morale drain on the team.
All right, so if I was in charge, I would absolutely tempo 2 guys in the ground. I've got my 2 big guys. I'm deciding the most durable one goes out first, the one most likely not to get beaten, and I'm keeping the guy most likely to score a submission or get a win to the end, right? The first match, I think it's imperative you do not lose. You don't want to be playing from behind in this format. Also, when we go back and watch that event that I referenced that the B Team Bulls won, their matches, like the first match against Polaris, every match was a draw, and then they won an overall decision to advance. It shows you that it can be very hard when 2 guys are playing against each other who are very, very skilled to actually get a win. I don't think like that first match, if it doesn't go your way, like the rest could be draws and that's you done. You lose 1-0. So I think it's very important not to play for behind. When we did the event, we, in our first match, I was on holiday at the time, other guys were doing it, full credit to them. They lost the first match and then the first individual matchup of the first round, and then they eventually turned it around when like the guy who's probably the best finisher in our team, managed to come in later on and catch up and get a couple of wins, you know? Because you had to win 2 to like 1 to cancel out and then 1 to then take the lead. So from my point of view, I wouldn't want to lose early and play from behind. I would at least want to draw. The other thing I'm thinking is like big guy, like if another team thinks, oh, put our lightest guy out first, I think the light guy, regardless of how good they are in this, is really going to struggle against a under 99 when you get up to that size. So you could get a win that way. So if we were to take B team, for example, I'm looking at Nicky Rod and Victor Hugo as like the 2 guys out of tempo. I'd probably put Victor out first and save Nicky Rod, although I'd be happy to flip it and have it the other way around. What do you think of that idea of like those 2 guys being on either side, and then in the middle, you've got the 3 guys to play around with that you're matching more on the fly?
My counter argument to that would be, if you put out, so you're picking the durable guy first. This isn't necessarily the case, but if you're picking the 2 guys and you've got like the one that's better at finishing, the one that's more durable, the one that's more durable also maybe is less likely to be a submission threat, but he's durable. So, you know, taking into consideration the strategy of picking a guy in between rounds, if you put your durable guy out first that also doesn't have the best submission attempt, you could lose him off the board straight away. Whereas if you keep him in reserve and maybe you put out like a solid 77 or 88, and then there's a guy on the other team that is just murking everyone, you've still got your big solid guy that can stall that guy out and take that guy off the board. Whereas if you put him out first, then maybe he doesn't have the best submission threat and he gets taken out by someone, or not taken out, but he gets stalled out by someone, then that's your guy that can take the other guy out on the other team that is destroying everyone, submitting everyone. So that would be my counter argument to that.
Sure, and there's more than one strategy possible, and jump into the comments and let us know how you would play it. But I think like B team's a great example of like how like 5 guys that we can use within this. So we might stick with that, how we would set it up with them. But yeah, I just don't want to lose that. The other thing is, these like B team, for example, like they're all elite grapplers, right? They're all really, really good. So it's kind of like, I did think about this before as like, and I'm not saying you were not right to use this word, but you know, when we say durable, it's kind of like you call Victor Hugo like your durable guy at first. Like he's gonna be able to submit a lot of people in the event, or just like maybe not as elite as he is overall. So it's kind of like we're using good guys here. You know, I'm using B team as my example because not only do you get guys who are durable, but the durable ones do have a submission threat, and vice versa. The guys who are a bit better at submission, like they do have a durability, as opposed to like one of the teams we scored lower in the rankings, which if you didn't see, tune in all the vids. We ranked each team as we went along, but they're just going to have a tough time of it regardless of strategy, you know? So it doesn't like they've got a way of playing it that probably gives them a better chance, but they're going to have a real hard time against one of these top teams. So regardless, that would be my thinking. Either Victor Hugo or Nicky Rod out first, and then I'd save him in reserve. Either that 5th match, because you need to win it to get over the line, or you possibly need to win 2, 1 to make up an earlier deficit, and then 1 to at least draw the situation, or if you win it, you get over the line and get in. So I always like, that's the thing, I don't want to fall into the trap of using good guys early, or really, really good guys early. They get drawn and they're out, and then like it comes to the last match, you need someone to get you over the line, it's your 66 guy. You know, I don't think that's a smart strategy. So it's kind of like I'm trying to play a strategy that I think avoids obvious mistakes and pitfalls along the way. That's kind of the way I go from it, you know? So let's just say we go with a different idea. So you're B team chief. you don't put out Victor Hugo or Nicky Rod first. You've got to pick one other guy on that team to put out. Who's your guy?
I think I would put out Joseph Chen first. I think they put him out first on the Polaris team when he was on the Polaris team, right?
He was on the Polaris team. He was not out first.
What was it?
Sorry, he was on. Oh, sorry. I'm getting confused because I'm looking at this B team versus Polaris match, and I'm like, oh no, Joseph was on the B team. No, Joseph was on that Team Polaris event, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember how they did it. I think they maybe did it like even if you won on points, you won the match. But I think he maybe won a couple matches and took out some bigger guys. And like I think he would be a handful for a lot of guys. And then if he even stalls out a bigger guy, and then you've still got to face Victor Hugo and Nicky Rod later on, or he even like wins by submission, that can be a big start to the match.
The only thing about using Polaris as a reference point is like it has a completely different setup and scoring system. So it's got like 2 45-minute halves. And if you win by submission, I think you get 3 points or 2 points relative to like if you win a decision, you get 1 point. So you've got much more scope for like coming from behind, making up big gaps, etc. With this one, it's really tight. Like there's only 5 matches to play with.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think because the coaches can select who they want to go and face the guy that stays on, I think most of the strategy is going to be in that as opposed to like roughly in your head who you've got like starting or finishing. I think that's where most of the strategy is going to come into, in my opinion.
Well, I think it's the strategy starts with who do you put out first, because that's what you've got control over the most. You know, that's probably like my biggest decision going into it. And then my second biggest decision is who am I trying my best to keep in reserve to get us over the line at the very end. And then I play the midsection, the 3 matches in the middle. I use my 66, 77, and 88 guy. And I think they can, those 3 guys, like that 3 weight classes, like you can just about match up decently. If you've got a good 66 guy with a bit of size, you can match them against the 2 weight classes and maybe come out okay. The 77 guy or the 88 guy, you should have a guy in your team who's both durable and a submission specialist. And certainly you need like one of them either is your 77 or 88 guy. So I like playing around with those weight classes in the middle. But let's just say you put Joseph out first, right?
Yeah.
So who are you keeping to the end?
Yeah, I think it would depend on who was like in front of me. I don't think there's that much between Nicky Rod and Victor Hugo. There's pros and cons to both. I think it would depend on who is in front of you at the time. And then I think on a couple other considerations for your like archetypal guy at the end that is the big guy with like the strong submission threats to get you over the finish line is one, are they able to implement that submission game when people are stalling on them? Because that is going to be a strategy that is used if you've just got that one guy left and he needs to get these 3 wins. Like, is he a guy that requires someone to engage with him to get a submission game going, or can he enforce that on anyone even if they're stalling on him? So that's one factor. Then as well, it's just like how well they do under pressure. You might have someone that doesn't really do well under pressure. So if you have your big, strong submission threat, you actually might be better putting them out in the middle of the match to casually pick up a couple subs because there may be a bit of a choker at the end, or you've got someone that really rises to the occasion when it's needed as well. So I think that's another couple factors.
Yeah, I think you're right to highlight these things, and this is why the coach is important, and the coach has to know their team, and then the team. Each individual in the team, the dynamics of the team really affects choices. Just like on that Scottish event, we had Tristram go out last in the final. It came down to that match. And like, you know from training with Tristram how good he is at submissions. And if you need a guy like win the last match, you don't want to go to the judges or whatever it is, like you need a guy to win. I think you need a guy like him. Now, he's not necessarily like, I don't think he was the heaviest guy on the team. It was a different format where it's like the team weight. So we don't have like the weight classes like at CJI. It was more like Quintet was like that, wasn't it? Like the original Quintet, you had to be underneath a certain weight as a team. But like, as long as your guy's like under 88, under 99, over 99, and has like the ability to submit people, I like having one of them in reserve. Now, just going back to that event, the Quintet 4, I think it was, with the B Team Bulls, I think they lined up ideally in their first match. So what they did was they put Nicky Rod out first. They then had J-Rod, Joseph Chen, Nicky Ryan, and then Craig Jones was out last. I think that was a good strategy. Just before you come in, that said, ultimately, every match went to a draw and B Team won judges' favour. But I like the way they set out their team to give themselves the best chance of winning.
Yeah, I think I heard there was actually like a gentleman's agreement between the two teams to have Owen versus
Nicky Rod,
because people wanted wrestling, so that's all.
Yeah. So hopefully we get a gentleman's agreement if it's Team America against B Team in the first, and we get Nicky Rod against Pat Downey.
Yeah, I don't know how keen Nicky Rod will be to agree to that, but we'll see.
And then we'll keep it on this because it's a good reference point. The final, it was B Team Bulls against 10th Planet. This one went slightly differently, right? Because of how the first match went. Because you're going to have to like adapt. Certainly if you win your semi-final and you have the final on the same day, and it's 2 tough matches. So in that, they changed their strategy. They put J-Rod out first. I think he was just keen to get out and get going. They then had Nicky Rod. He drew with PJ Barch. J-Rod also drew his first match. And then Craig Jones came out, right? And this shows the value of having like a really strong submission guy in the middle, because Craig subbed Richie Martinez, and then he subbed Gio Martinez, and then he drew with Kyle Bame, and then that was them winning overall. And that meant Joseph Chen didn't have to come out. But I think more importantly, Nicky Ryan didn't have to come out, and they were trying to keep Nicky. I think he was tired after the first round, and like they were trying to keep him in reserve very much. Pardon?
I think Joseph had trials within a couple of weeks. They were trying to keep him fresh as well. But I think like there is a good example of what I was saying with Craig, because I think don't want to say this flat out, but it could be argued Craig is somewhat of a choker. He's got like the Chael Sonnen thing of like, I don't know if he mentally defeats himself at the very last hurdle. Could be argued.
Hold on. Right. Just on that, right? Because the last hurdle, right, he's got 2 silvers at ADCC. Is that right? Right. And 1 silver came against Kynan.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't say is a choke job.
No.
Okay, what was the other one?
It's not just ADCC that he's came in second. It's just like that has been a bit of a pattern for it. I must say.
What was that at ADCC? Do you remember?
It was a
final.
Which he should have won that match, but I think he more lost that because he was ill, to be fair.
Okay, counter argument. Craig Jones was the hero for his team this time and got them over the line.
Counter argument to what?
You're saying perhaps he gets to the end and it's like the potential like choke. He didn't. He got him over the line.
I think it could be argued that because he was put in the middle and just like out till
he had the weight. He had the weight of trying to keep Joseph off the mat because Joseph had trials coming up, and the weight of Nicky Ryan being too tired and probably like taking zings in the back and like not being ready for the next match. Craig knew he had to get his team over the line, and he came to the fore and he got it done.
Could make that argument, but I would also make the argument if you had just subbed one of the matches and drew one of the matches that Joseph and Nicky could have got them over the line.
I think also this comes into like reading the situation, because I think that middle section of the 10th Planet team was underpowered relative to Craig Jones and Craig Jones's strengths. So it's like, okay, PJ Barch, against Craig, kind of could go either way. Could be a draw, probably, in that environment. And then Kyle Bame was a draw. That, like, Craig submitting Richie and Gio wasn't a massive surprise. to me. So kind of like you could make the argument that, but then this is why I'm thinking like maybe try and keep the submission specialist in reserve. But like if you see a weak spot in the middle of their team, under 66 guys sitting there ready to be taken out, go out and get them, you know, and maybe put your team ahead. So there is an idea like you go, okay, Craig, like we were thinking about 5, but actually like they're now in a situation where like their guy's vulnerable. Go and get him out, and then you get the next guy. We're predicting it'll be this guy come out. You could probably beat him as well, and we're off and running. So yeah, there's got to be scope for some movement, right? I agree. But let's say we're using this B team situation again, right? To go back to that idea. So you've put Joseph out first, and then what was your last one that you might put out that you're trying to keep? Certainly the guy you would like to keep back if you could.
Just either one of them, to be honest. Like I said,
Okay.
most of the strategy is just like match by match.
But the thing is, what I'm trying to get at is like, would you be comfortable if who's the other 2 guys on the team? So you'd either have Chris Wojcik or Ethan Crownston going out really late. I would try and use them in the middle and try and get good matchups for them.
Use them in the middle, but only if it made sense with the match that's in front of them. If they have the, because obviously they might know who the next match is going to be if the other team has just gotten a sub. If not, then they don't know. So in circumstances they don't know, then yeah, I think it maybe makes sense to use them up in the middle. If they do know who's in front of them, then you would want to make a more calculated decision based on like who's the best guy to take out that person.
But that's me. We didn't use them like. I think there's too much variability in putting one of those 2 guys out first in terms of like, okay, there's a lot of guys in the event that could potentially beat them just based on like size and credentials. So it's a risk. That's what I'm saying. In the middle, you've got better scope for trying to work out who they might come up against and trying to have a little bit of control of that situation. I would like to do when I've got guys who are in the category of like an Ethan or a Chris, you know? And then again, Ethan and Chris have different skill sets. So trying to match up their skill sets relative to opponent, I think is a good idea. Like one guy who I'd be wary of sending out first, for example, in this event is Kynan. Because sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get with Kynan, and you can get off to a slow start, and you don't want them off the board early, right? So if I was Atos, I'd be more inclined to send like Hulk or Philippe out first.
Yeah. But then Philippe's quite clutch. So
yeah. So maybe Hulk out first.
Yeah.
You know, and Hulk like probably going to be tough to get off the board, could pick up a submission win, and then like probably use, who else have we got then? Pato and Ronaldo Jr. And then, you know, use Kynan and Penna relative to who they're facing later on. That's going to be a tough team to beat, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially, you know, if they get to see who's in front of them, and like Pato can definitely beat a lot of 66, 77, maybe even some 88 guys, and that's their 66. So given that, if he can do that in some matches, and then you've still got the 3 bigger guys, and then Ronaldo as well is going to be very difficult to do anything to as well.
Just to bring this to a close, when we've run through some of these ideas, do you think now, given that you know the team compositions and the potential strategy that you would go with, do you think any teams like got like a better mix between the 2 things there, like the athletes they've got and the potential strategy where they make it like, I'm thinking there like Atos and B team, like they've both got like a great mix of athlete and potential use of strategy, maybe even just slightly more so than New Wave. But like, let me know, like, do you think now there's like a team, like if they play their cards right, you're like, oh, that is going to be an absolute nightmare to beat? And is it New Wave, or is it one of these other teams that you're thinking, oh, actually, like if we're adding strategy, tactics, etc. to team composition, and we only looked at team composition in our rankings, is there one of these top 3 teams that we've got that you now think, oh, actually, like they could well win out because of this? And what about like a team who could cause a shock from underneath, or maybe because of this idea of like how you play your cards?
I think like it's going to be tough regardless of strategy for any of the teams outside B Team, New Wave, and Atos to win, just because like no matter what strategy you use, if you're going up against Atos, you're still going to have to like beat Kynan, you're still going to have to beat Felipe. It's like people in these big brackets, you've got some people in like jiu-jitsu competitions or whatever else that are like, oh, I really hope I get this match or this match, and then you've got the other people with the more like stud mindset of like, I don't give a fuck who I come up against, I want to win and I'm going to have to beat whoever anyway, you know? So I think regardless of how you cut it, like Team Europe, if they come up against Atos, they're still going to have to face Felipe and Kynan anyway you cut it. Within those 3 teams, like them facing each other, I think the strategy is going to be a lot more important compared to those teams against the lower seeded teams.
Okay. And then like, so team individuals allied with strategy, who are you leaning towards? Because previously we had New Wave, Atos, then B Team, and it was pretty tight between the 3. We were thinking, after this chat, is it still like that? Or is it even more compressed? Or have you like shifted slightly and you could see Atos or B Team just going slightly ahead of New Wave in your favorites?
Yeah, with the recent changes to New Wave, that like dropped down in my head a little bit, but then like I think strategically, if you were to bet on any coach to have like a good strategy, you probably bet on John Danaher. So maybe that evens things up. I think between those 3, it is very tough to decide. I think that's pretty good for the viewers, but I think it's going to be very tough to pick between those 3, given the strategies, given the size of the athletes and everything. They've all got various strengths and weaknesses, but it's going to be pretty tight between those 3.
Which you're right, it's great for the viewers. It's great for us tuning in. It's very much up in the air. Let us know in the comments what you think. If you've got a team where you've seen the guys and you've thought of a strategy and you think that's going to make them like the best team, the number 1 seed in your head. We still think it's tight between the 3. We might change the one thing that might change our view, Calum, is when the brackets come out. And then we see who faces who. One of these teams is going to be on the opposite side of the draw to the other 2. I think we're safe in saying that, right? So they're not going to put 3 of these teams on one side of the draw.
No.
So I think it makes it more straightforward for the team that's not going to face one of these other teams in the semi-final. And then the final against the guy that comes through the other side of the bracket, right? So that can have an effect.
Yeah, I'm just double checking with my phone that it is Wednesday and we are halfway through the week and we still don't have the brackets out.
Well, we'll see when we release this episode. So it could come ahead of the brackets coming out, which might come out later in the week, or could go out slightly later. But yeah, you're right. Let's just put it on record. This event was taking place and we got to Wednesday and the event is on Saturday and we didn't know the matches, which I think is, given all the sport that I watch, I don't know a situation like this where it's just like, oh yeah, well done, you've qualified for the World Cup. Right, what we'll do is we'll wait until 4 days before the event and then we'll tell you who you're going to face. Wimbledon. Oh yeah, just come to London and then, we'll put the bracket out just before the event,
Yeah, like I think the promotion that I've been seeing for the most part is just Craig like individually announcing certain grapplers and saying a little bit about them. I think there could be a little bit more done to build the hype in the week coming up to it. And putting the brackets out and having people speak about that ahead of time definitely would be a good start.
Just my quick thoughts on that. Yeah, Craig doing a pretty good job on Instagram, hyping the athletes. Needs a team around them, or a better team around them, or a bigger team around them, doing a lot more with things like brackets, getting interviews out there with people, feeding athletes to places where they could be interviewed, proper media strategy. And yeah, I think like I see a lot of stuff online about the athletes. I see a lot of stuff online about like the clothes that you can buy at the event, but not like a load on having like a functional website that tells you the times that the matches are going to be on and all this kind of stuff. And then because people want to tune in, like I'm already planning my weekend. There's football on. There's all sorts of things happening. Like I can't, I want to know what's happening ahead of time. So yeah, a little bit more on the organization. And then another thing, if I may, I think a lot of the athletes and teams taking part could be doing a lot more to promote the event. I heard before, oh, we're going to go, wait till you see the content that we put out prior to the event. Haven't seen much from other teams, taking part. I think if we were there, Calum, heading up a team, we'd be putting out a lot more stuff. Even if it's just podcast interviews, but it would be content, right? So anyway, yeah, I think you're right to flag that. Who knows, by the time this episode goes out, the brackets might be out, and we'll do a later episode on our thoughts once the brackets are out. But you're right to highlight, really, for a top sporting event, we need to know these sorts of things ahead of time. And when you compare it to other elite events happening in other sports, that does definitely happen. So anyway, on the positive, we don't know who's going to win, and we're super excited to find out.